Hi,
Hi there.
how you doing?
Good.
Tired
Tired?
a little bit. Alright.
Oh, um, I gotta plug in my, hold on, I gotta plug in my iPad. I was so tired yesterday and couldn't figure out why. It was like one of those nights where you fall asleep at 9:30. But it was good to fall asleep at 9:30. Okay, I'm back. Okay. Oh, Krista. Hey, Krista. Alrighty. Well, yay, it's our last class. That's crazy, right? Um, so does somebody want to volunteer to go first?
I don't mind going first. I think mine might be a little shorter than I wanted to make it, but it was just so much information that I think short is okay for this type of style.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
is that,
cool. Uh,
yeah,
oh, whoops. What am I doing? Oh, okay. I'm gonna take notes. So I'm opening up my little iPad notebook. Okay, so do you wanna here, let me give you the ability to share your screen and you can take it away, Gabby.
okay, let me just find it. It's okay. Let me find
And what did
it.
you do yours on again?
It was on Dish Style.
Oh, nice. Okay,
So
cool.
it was, yeah, it was interesting. So I'll go ahead and start. Oh, actually, to share the screen, I just what do I do? Share the screen. Oh, it's on the bottom here.
Yeah, down the bottom and just click that and then you can tell it what you wanna.
Okay. Okay, it says I'm sharing the screen. Oh, okay. Can you you guys can see it, right?
I can see a white screen.
Yeah,
Okay.
just a white one.
Can you
Oh, yeah,
see?
now I see
Okay.
it.
Okay, so um I don't have my notes, so I'm just gonna go by the slides. This is the Dish Style. It's pronounced Dish Style. It's a Dutch word for style. And this movement started out as a magazine that promoted artists and abstract art. And it was founded by Piet Mondrian and Theo van Doesburg from the Netherlands and active from 1917 to 1931. And this is just a few of their, you can see their style is very unadorned. It's just kind of straight lines and squares. And that was the style. And that was the publications. And these were the main artists. So from left to right, it's Piet Mondrian, Theo van Doesburg, Bart Vanderlik, and I cannot say these names, Van Tongerlu, and then Vordenberg Gilderwatt, and Gerrit Rietveld, and J.P. Oud.
Very
And
names.
I know they're tough to say. Gerrit Rietveld created I guess there's not a lot of architecture that's true Dish style, but he did create a house for just for a patron. I can't actually remember who it was for, but the thing with the architecture in Dish style is the occupant has to conform to the design, not the other way around. So it was very strict in their aesthetic. So the style was formed as a reaction against the violence of World War I. The Dish style movement aimed to create a universal visual language for artists to use towards a utopian world where the visual language consisted of precisely rendered geometric forms. So this is Piet Mondrian's composition piece of just rectangles and squares, and they're either vertical or they're horizontal. Okay, so the lines, squares, rectangles, and primary colors were universal to understand in any culture and transcended language. The search for harmony was revealed through the ordered and precise patterns of lines and colors. And I like this chair because it's not totally vertical and horizontal. This has like a slight diagonal, and to allow the person to sit comfortably. And then, but here is shown the classic vertical, horizontal lines and squares. And so in 1923, founding members Mondrian and von Doesburg disagreed about the use of the diagonal line in Gestalt. Von Doesburg wanted to create more dynamic pieces, while Mondrian viewed the diagonal line as impure of the Gestalt aesthetic. So Mondrian left the group, and von Doesburg continued the group until I think it's 1931. And so these are pieces of van Doesburg's work that included the diagonal. By looking at it, you can see it looks like Gestalt, but just angled. So that was the big disagreement. Mondrian, I think he just thought it was too dynamic, because his idea was that the visual language was precisely vertical, horizontal, squares, and rectangles. Okay, and the influence of Gestalt. So it had a lot of influence, and in a way it was kind of universal, because a lot of other artists took that as inspiration, and also it's been kind of co-opted in the mainstream. So this is just an example of, I think it was Yves Saint Laurent, and I should have written it down, but I didn't write it down. But I think it's Yves Saint Laurent, Mondrian dress, and then this is a White Stripes album cover, and it's called Gestalt. And then this is the Eames house. So this is kind of the Gestalt with the horizontal and vertical lines and the color blocking, and the colors were just primary colors. Oh gosh, ignore the text on there. Sorry, this was from the template.
I didn't know what that was.
Yeah.
That's cool.
The influences all show up in design, because it is universal, and actually it's funny because Gestalt used the squares and the lines, and they of course existed before Gestalt ever used them. So when people use them, they don't necessarily I don't think it's all, I don't know how to explain. It's just the squares existed before Gestalt existed, the lines existed before Gestalt existed, but it's the way they put it together. So you could see the colors, the primary colors, and then including the use of black and white. And then here is a little twist on it with like this kind of teal color. And then this is more of a Mondrian style. And again, this is kind of a twist on it with this green. And that's it.
Oh, that's a cool wall.
Yeah, that's really neat. I think I got it off of, so the images, I went to these two sources to find a lot of these images that had this style, the Gestalt interior.
Yeah, that wall is really cool.
Yeah.
And it's like a mezzanine. I think it's interesting how they didn't bring the stairs into it. The stairs are just like
Oh yeah.
their own kind of thing. Like they could have made the stairs like at least black or something like that to add like the black rectangles. It would have looked
Yeah.
very different. And I might have even liked that better. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. I know that it's like those primary colors. Once you like mix those and put them in like kind of like a matrix or whatever, you all of a sudden have, you know, that style.
Yeah, exactly. It's just they just pop out of there, and it just looks very ordered. And yeah, because I was thinking a lot of primary colors are used in like children's, you know, nurseries, toys, things like that. I mean, now they're, you know, they've changed it up a lot, but it's just I've always associated primary colors with like children's, kids type of things. And but the way it's done in Dish Style is so ordered that it just kind of makes it more sophisticated, you know, than a but children like toys and decor do use the Dish Style, like it's
Yeah,
been used. Like I think it could be taken anyway. It's just kind of like a palette, you know, that you can, I guess, tweak anyway.
right. I think it's really interesting that the diagonal line like was the death
Oh,
of the
oh yeah.
Mond-
Um,
Mondrian's like participation in the group. Like,
yeah, that was the only thing. He was even Mondrian was okay with circles, but he didn't like them. But he thought sometimes you do need a circle, and he was about utility. Sometimes you need a circle and utility, and
mm,
but he didn't necessarily like them, and it had to be a perfect, precisely measured circle. But I don't know why he had a problem with diagonals. But he felt like it was just a betrayal. He just felt really insulted by them or something. I don't know.
maybe because we can't live on a diagonal. Like we can be vertical, we can be horizontal, but we can't really. I mean, unless we're going upstairs, really, on
Yeah,
an
you
escalator, you
for like
can't really like live diagonally.
yeah, I think that's probably it because yeah, von Duesenberg wanted to create more motion, and so where Mondrian wanted order and just, you know, boxes and lines, and he want and I guess that made sense to him as a language, and while von Duesenberg wanted to just add the dynamic in it. But yeah, I guess that makes sense that it doesn't rest, it just kind of
Right.
moves, you know.
What was the thing that their philosophy, the occupant must conform?
Well, it was so for example, this chair, so their philosophy of design was that because they're using such pure elements and techniques of the perfectly measured squares, lines, rectangles, that they didn't have to change anything or adapt to the occupant of, like, say, the house, or the owner of a, like, say, the furniture, because they were so precise. So they had a very strict um sense of, like, of just making things and building things, and because they thought it was like the perfect
Uh,
perfect visual language. And so yeah, so for the this, let me get his name, for the Garrett Raytveld house, which I'm sorry I don't have a picture of right now, but he designed it so it was very Dish style, and that it was like it was just his design. The occupant didn't have any say in it, and the theory was that they have to adapt to the perfectness of that design. I
that's
know it was kind of backwards, but
I love it. That's cool. Well, cool. Thanks. I find them fascinating. I mean, it's fascinating that they just have such a like strong sort of point of view that a diagonal line could like make or break it. I think that's
yeah. And I
super.
didn't realize I stopped sharing my screen because I'm like looking at the slides and I'm thinking you guys could see them. But anyways, yeah.
No, I can see it. We can see it.
Oh, you could. Okay.
Yeah. 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 No, I love all the pictures. And I love that you had like the Yves Saint Laurent and the white stripes. That's cool.
Yeah, that's a neat dress. And it's done. It's been done again and again, and I think I
Yeah.
mean, it's a straight line.
Yeah. I mean, that's so like 60s, right?
Yeah.
That's cool. Awesome. Well, thanks.
Thanks. And then, do I need to turn anything off here?
Oh,
Sorry.
let's see. You can just say stop sharing. Go to the bottom and say stop sharing,
Okay.
and then the next person, whoever wants to go, um,
I'll go.
can go. Oh, okay. Thanks, Eden. All right, Eden. So I think you should be able to share.
Hmm.
And Eden, what did you do? Oh, you did.
The World's Fair.
Cool. Oh, I already love the images.
There it is. Okay. Yeah, I had a lot of fun going through the posters. They
Post-
definitely switched over. I mainly put ones that are like pre 1930s because they became like much more much more simplistic and modern after that. Like maybe like a couple of shapes, even like a lot more abstract. But I really love the old illustrative and like
God,
Mucha
so pretty.
posters. Yeah. Okay. So, oh, I get my paper here. Okay. So I think what's really fascinating about the World's Fairs and the architecture is that so few of the original buildings still exist in any form. And even then, they've usually been massively reconstructed, like had all of their materials replaced. So they're almost a different building. And it's just like it exists. These memories exist really only through, like first person accounts and photography and art. But I feel like they're still like so captivating. They really give you this sense of time and like the time that they took place in. So first, I want to talk about probably the most well-known of these structures built for a World's Fair, which was the Eiffel Tower, which was built for the Exposition Universelle, which is the 1889 World's Fair in Paris. And it was constructed over 2 years, and it is 1,063 feet tall. And it was the tallest man-made structure in the world for 41 years, which I did not know that. That was actually interesting.
Mhm.
Until it was surpassed by the Chrysler Building. But interestingly enough, I don't know. I mean, there's one story I definitely heard a lot about this, but it was majorly despised by many prominent French artists at the time. And there was even a letter of protest that was published in the newspaper Le Temps with a few dozen prominent signatories trying to get them not to build it. And there was also a major push for them to, demolish it after the fair. They really did not want it there. But the one story I always remember is like, I looked it up, it was like Guy de Maupassant, I think that's his name.
Mhm.
And he would always have, he would have lunch there every day because it was the only place in Paris where you wouldn't have to see it. He really hated it. And there's a picture of it, an illustration that as part of the fair that it was built for. And I really love the older like illustrations of it. Like as much as the photography is really cool, I just really love seeing like an artist's interpretation of how it looked. Okay, let's see. And it's a similar sort of story, but it's not still standing. But the very first Ferris wheel was built for the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago in 1893. It was inspired by the job that they did with the Eiffel Tower. They wanted to compete with that. I mean, obviously it's nowhere near as tall. It's only 80 meters tall. But it has really, it's pretty impressive for the very first Ferris wheel. It was, it could carry, 2,160 people at full capacity in all 36 gondolas. And a ride would cost 50 cents, which is like roughly $15 today.
That's a lot.
Yeah. It wasn't actually in the main fairgrounds. It was in the Midway, which was like off-site a little bit. Let me see. There's a picture I have. It's later in the slideshow, but you'll be able to see that it's like in the background. And it was purchased by I can't remember. It was, some group owned it, and it was later brought to the St. Louis World's Fair in 1904. And after that, it was demolished. But it's really an interesting piece of history, I think. Let's see. Okay, so this is the Crystal Palace, which we obviously already talked about. But I actually think it's really interesting because the whole fair, they had to build a building just to have the whole fair inside of it. So the building is absolutely gargantuan. Let's see, it's like almost half a kilometer from end to end, and the interior height is 128 feet. It had almost a 1 million square feet of exhibition space. And it's really interesting because it was designed by William Paxton, and it was created to make best use of the materials that they had. So they knew the size, the largest size mass-produced glass plate panes at that time were 10 inches by 49 inches. So they based the entire design around only using that one size. And so you can see like all of the panes of glass are the same size. That they didn't use different sizes at all. And it's also an interesting example of like early like modular building design. So like each of the exhibition spaces was either 24 feet by 24 feet or a multiples of those. They'd remove the divisions, but it was just basically like they wanted to keep the construction as simple as possible, just make it absolutely massive. And but it's really such an interesting building. They had to come up with different ways to deal with ventilation and cooling and sanitation. They had the first like really anything comparable to modern public bathrooms. And they used like gaps between the wooden like floor panels on the upper floor so that like dirt and dust would fall down. But they said something about how they didn't have as much of an issue with cleaning stuff up because women's long trailing skirts would do most of the cleaning for them, which is a bit gross. I can't even imagine. Ugh.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting the sorts of challenges they'd had to deal with having such a big space, with having so many people coming through. And there's this picture too, which is an illustration of the interior. So you can see like each of these areas is like the same size, but it's actually like he based it off of like there's like a wall size. It's like a kind of a complicated formula for why he built it like that. It's just a really gargantuan space. Okay. But after that, so now we're going back to 1893 again, jumping around a little bit. But the White City of the Chicago World's Fair is, I think, really like when they hit the peak of like getting all these like really knowledgeable people to work together to create a small city that was able to function, as well as they could get it to. And it was truly a marvel. Like it's really comparable to like modern, theme parks. It's like Disneyland, but they made it in a year, or like less than 2 years, I think. Okay. So the principal designers of the layout of the fair were Daniel Burnham and John Wellborn Root, who were the creators of the Chicago school style. And Frederick Law Olmsted, he was the co-designer of New York Central Park. And Charles B. Atwood, who was the designer of the Fine Arts Building, which is the only structure of the fair that still remains in its original location. They really focused on following the principles of the Beaux-Arts school to create an environment that was like harmonious. So they followed like symmetry and like everything is just very artful. But let's see, that is the Museum of Science and Industry, which is the former Fine Arts Building. It's been almost completely overhauled. There's like, none of the buildings were built to last, so they had to, fix it up um, oh, and I also, it's interesting because I feel like this fair really put an imprint on, it really kind of came to symbolize the like concept of American exceptionalism. It's really tied into the visual imagery associated with the fair. And so it's really become kind of immortalized through art. And an interesting example is that BioShock Infinite was a video game that was made inspired by the fair, like the city, and it is called Columbia. And it's set, it's like, I think in the game, it's like the city was constructed at the time the fair was built. So it takes place after that, but I think it's really interesting how much longevity the imagery has had.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Okay.
It's cool.
But as much as there's been longevity for the aesthetics and imagery, they've had a lot of issues with the construction. Ultimately, none of the buildings were built to last. They've had major issues, but one interesting story is with the Fine Arts building that was constructed for the 1894 California Midwinter International Exposition in San Francisco in Golden Gate Park. But some of these fairs have the longest names. It is an Egyptian revival building, and it is it's kind of interesting. You really only get to see older pictures of it because it did not last. It was majorly damaged in the 1906 earthquake, and they did manage to shore it up because it did have it was a free museum by that point, and they had obviously like art collections in it. They had to have some place to keep all that stuff until they built the replacement. And so the designer, Louis Christian Molgart, who is the architecture coordinator for the 1915 Panama Pacific Exposition, which was also held in San Francisco, he designed the, he called it Spanish Plateresque. So there's a detail of that one, but he designed this new building. That was built, God, I think it was finished in the 20s. I can't remember. I think that was it. Yeah, it was like mid 1920s when it was finished. It's also a very interesting building, but like much bigger. But that building was then majorly damaged in the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake. So they've had a lot of issues, obviously, in San Francisco. So eventually, they replaced that with the modern De Young Museum. So it's gone through a lot of iterations.
So that's what's standing there today.
Yeah, they still have some of the stuff. Like there's this thing, I don't know what it's called, something vase. It was originally in front of the, is it in that picture? No, it's not in this picture. It's really interesting though. It's this big, interesting vase with like cherubs crawling all over it. It's supposed to be like about wine production. And I think they still have that at the park there. But yeah, it's like, they had issues with the stuff because it was just like, it just was so shoddy. And it was also because it's near the ocean. So all of the steel support was getting rusty. So they couldn't even like keep around a lot of the park. They had to get rid of it. And on the other side of San Francisco is the Palace of Fine Arts, which was built for the 1915 fair. And interestingly enough, wait, where is it? Oh, my video. Oh, there. Okay. It represents a successful preservation effort, kind of. It was built to look like crumbling Roman ruins, but it obviously didn't actually hold out very well. Like by the 50s, it was doing really badly, but it had been preserved after the fair by an effort spearheaded by Phoebe Apperson Hearst, who's the mother of William Randolph Hearst. And I just wanted to play this little video because they demolished it. The sound. There. Okay. And there is the recreation of the Palace of Fine Arts today.
Oh, wow.
And it's actually really interesting. They only omitted like a couple bits, but it's a really faithful recreation of the original. Okay, so now we're switching into where we just learned about, which was the, this is one of those long ones, the International Exhibition of Modern, Decorative, and Industrial Arts, which is of course the fair that Art Deco got its name from. And here's the entrance gate, which I think is very cool. So this is the like front and the back side. And we learned like, you know, it's a very important fair, but I feel like, you know, it's one of those ones where like there's nothing left of it other than the impact that it had on design, which was really monumental. But it is interesting to look back at these early examples. So there's these department store pavilions that I think are really cool. Let me see. And talk about, oh yeah, and I didn't really know much about how Art Deco became, so I just put some examples of Art Deco architecture. So there's the Theater Club that I was mentioning. And I didn't know actually that it was kind of, it flowed into Streamline Moderne, which is like more, this is like more 30s.
Mm-hmm.
It got simpler and like streamlined, so it's supposed to look like there's all those buildings that look like ships.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then I wanted to talk about building, which was also at the 1925 fair. It's the Pavilion of L'Esprit Nouveau by Le Corbusier. And L'Esprit Nouveau, or the New Spirit, is, well, it was his magazine, which was based off of his Purist movement, which was critical of traditional decorative arts. And it's just really about like, you know, pure, clean line modernity. I think this building is really interesting because you see the tree sticking out of the top, but that was simply utilitarian because they weren't allowed to remove any trees from the site. You just had to work around it. But interesting too is that the organizers of the fair hated it. They absolutely despised it. They tried to put up a fence around it. But you know, like Corbusier, he had to appeal to the Ministry of Fine Arts to have the fence removed. And at the end here, I have the Barcelona Pavilion, which I didn't actually know it was a recreation. The history of that is interesting. It was, you know, of course, the original was built for the 1929 International Exposition in Barcelona, and it was supposed to be an example, it was supposed to represent the new Weimar Germany, which was, you know, kind of unfortunate considering what came to be after that, but very interesting image of future and still like so impactful, even, you know, like almost a century later. But it was taken apart. The pavilion was taken apart only like a year after it was completed, because that was the plan. Like they didn't plan to leave it up. And it was actually part of a project in the mid-1980s by a group of architects in like Catalan architects. They wanted to recreate the pavilion on the original location on the footings, and they found like, you know, they obviously have original materials like the wall and, you know, like all the stone, I think is original. And so they actually recreated it, but it kind of feels like a counterpoint to the concept of modernism, which was exemplified in the pavilion. It's supposed to be a complete rejection of the past. So to have this kind of nostalgic desire to recreate this important building kind of contradicts that concept, which I think is interesting. There's been a lot of criticism of the recreation. I think that's kind of interesting, like, because ultimately you really can't recreate the original. It's always going to be its own thing. It's going to be the recreation, because the original only existed for a year, you know, in 1929. So I don't know, it's kind of interesting. You really can't recreate the past, but the past is still so intriguing, you know. And that's it. I didn't go into later fairs. Okay.
I'm so fascinated with those, with all the structures.
Mhm.
I know we've mentioned it before, but that book, Devil in the White City, about the Colombian
Yeah.
Revolution is such an
Yeah, I
interesting,
have my, where's my copy?
and
where's
just hearing them talk about
There's my
trying to meet
copy.
those deadlines, trying to meet those deadlines for building those buildings and designing those gardens, and didn't like all
Yeah.
said almost like go insane, like somebody almost, or maybe more than
It
one
was
person, like
nuts.
almost went insane, like they were just like, it was
Yeah.
so
And it was so hard because they kept on having issues where they would rush the construction so much that it would just fall apart. And then they would be behind schedule even more. And God, I just
such a
can't even
nightmare,
imagine
such
working
a
with that
nightmare.
crunch. Yeah, because it was supposed to be like the Columbian Exposition, so it's supposed to be like for like Columbus's discovery of the
They
Americas.
were just like,
And so yeah, but the fair didn't even open until a year after that. But they had a dedication, and they were like, we need more time.
yeah, it's really, really interesting. And it's just, it's so, it's, I don't know, it's just so interesting to think about building temporary buildings and doing all that work for a temporary thing. Like,
Yeah,
it's,
yeah,
I mean, it's kind of like, in a way, we still kind of do it for the Olympics, but we're always like, oh, but we'll use it later, and then
hmm
depending on the Olympics, then they
yeah,
do or they don't. And it's just like so wasteful and such a waste of time in a way, like to do that kind
yeah.
of thing. And I think it's just not a great, a sustainable thing to do.
Yeah, it's just not realistic to do something like that nowadays.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really cool. Thanks. It's really, really interesting. And I love that those photos of the progress of the Eiffel Tower.
Oh yeah, that.
And the fact that, really thinking about it, like the Crystal
Yeah,
Palace was like basically the first like modular building.
yeah.
Yeah, but when you think about it,
That was
think
so
about,
interesting.
I got to build this building really quickly. I mean, of
hmm
course you would want to build it the easiest way possible.
Yeah,
Well, how do I do that? Well, just do it in 24 feet.
yeah. And just like having like just one like glass pane, so you don't have to deal with different sizes and shapes or any of that.
Yeah,
It's
that's
very practical. Unlike
yeah.
some of these projects.
And then the unfortunate thing was that it burned down.
Yeah.
Did you find out how did that
Well,
fire?
well, I think big parts of the structure were wood, but I don't actually know how I can't remember if I actually saw how it started. It had been moved to a different location
Weird.
and they wanted to keep it there, but didn't work out. Just,
Yeah.
so many of these buildings are ill-fated. It's really sad. You're like, oh man, I wish I could go there. Like they even wanted to keep it. It's like, no, it didn't happen.
Right. Right. Cool. Well, awesome. Thank you. So wait, it took them, so August,
I think it was 2 years,
so 2 years.
like a year and a half, maybe.
Yeah, a year and a half. Pretty good. Amazing.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Okay. Who wants to be next?
Okay.
I can go
Oh,
if nobody else.
yeah.
I don't know if you saw Krista's message, but it looked like she had to run, just FYI.
Oh yeah, I did see her. Oh God, I didn't see that. Oh, I feel bad. All right, well, what are you gonna do? Oh, okay. I can pull hers up and we can go through it. Go ahead, Sandy.
Okay. Let me share my screen. All right. Can everyone see this?
Yep.
Okay, great. So I did my project final presentation on 19th century arts and crafts movement, specifically focusing on the life and the works of William Morris. So just a brief summary of the arts and crafts movement. It emerged in United Kingdom around 1860 and spread to the rest of Europe and America from 1880s and lasting into the 1920s. And the founders of this movement were really some of the first major critics of the Industrial Revolution, the anti-industrialism and this mass production and the excesses of the Victorian design were what really spurred this movement. And William Morris, who I'm talking about today, and you'll see on the left, he's considered to be one of the founding fathers of the arts and crafts movement. He believed that artists and craftsmen should approach their work with this medieval level of purity and simplicity and to not really surrender to this industrial model. And he wanted people to take back pride in their creations and their originality. So focusing really on medieval craftsmanship, he employed a lot of these traditional artistic methods and these like folkloric decorations, and a consistent use of these elements is really what led to the trademark design of this era that we so strongly associate with today. So in summary, it really was all about the celebration of simple, honest craftsmanship. So who is William Morris? So he's, I would say, quite the multi-hyphenate. He's an English poet, writer, craftsman, designer, early socialist, and like I mentioned already, one of the leading, most influential figures of this arts and crafts movement. He was born in 1834 in East London into a very wealthy family and inheritance. So lucky him. This luxury really kind of gave him the privilege and the freedom to spend a lot of his time dedicated to exploring the outdoors and diving into literature, which kind of helped develop this deep connection and appreciation for nature, architecture, design, all of that from an early age. He studied at University of Oxford, where he met Edward Burne-Jones, who you'll see in the center here. There's a photo of the two of them. And Edward Burne-Jones is also a fellow leader in this movement. And this friendship really blossomed into this lifelong, relationship. And Burne-Jones is the one who introduced him to this group of like-minded individuals within this arts community called the Brotherhood. And that group kind of led him to work as an artist, painting murals at the Oxford Union Society. And working at Oxford is where he met his wife, his then-to-be wife, Jane Burden, who you see on the right, who he later married in 1859. So after, okay, I think my presentation is moving, right? The slide?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. It's a little stuck on my end, so let me know if you guys don't see anything. Okay, so after he and Jane were married, he went on to build what would be known as the first and most significant building of this movement. It's called the Red House that you'll see here. So they built this house in the countryside of southeastern England. And the location really allowed Morris to stay in close connection to nature, which is one of his biggest inspirations. And you'll kind of see that as a common thread throughout a lot of his design, is this tie to nature. So for the building, he commissioned Philip Webb, who's an architect, friend, and fellow member of that brotherhood, to help build this home. And they both really valued beauty of natural materials. So you'll see the use of the exposed red brick of the house is what gave the house its name, the Red House. And they found these natural materials to be far superior and better than anything industrially produced. So the house itself is this L shape, and that allowed you to really embrace the gardens, as well as it had this asymmetry that's pretty typical in that traditional Gothic structures. And it was a pretty big contrast to what we were seeing at the time in these suburban or country Victorian homes. And the inspiration for building the Red House was really started from this notion of creating this artistic community that he and his friends dreamed and talked about at their time at Oxford. And so they thought that through really thoughtful, unified architecture and design, the hope was to provide this sort of like stimulating environment for all of them to come and be creative and make things together. And it's like this workshop almost at the house. So after it was constructed in 1860, Webb, Morris, his wife Jane, and Edward Burne-Jones all worked together to decorate and design everything within the house. So anything from wallpaper, the stained glass windows, cabinetry, furniture, all of it. They spent about 2 years working on the interior. And the success around decorating the house resulted in them founding a firm called Morris, Marshall, Faulkner and Company. It's a group of makers and decorators with this vision to really revolutionize the Victorian tastes and sort of recapture the spirit and the quality of that craftsmanship. So I'll share a couple images of the interior. So here on the left side, you'll see the beautiful gardens and foliage. And then on the right, this really beautifully understated archway. I think it's so cool with the brick, how they did that. And that's the entrance of the home. And then a few more images of the interior. So there's this, the entrance, or like the entry hall, I suppose on the left side, you'll see with a bunch of windows, lots of light. There's doors, passageways on either side, and this beautiful wooden staircase over on the end. And that tall dresser that you see in that left photo is actually designed by the architect Philip Webb and then painted by Morris himself. And then the large dresser in the middle is another Webb design piece with this like striking red lacquer. And it's got the Gothic sort of canopy design up top. And then the far right, I thought this was a pretty cool detail of the hallway ceiling. So it's plasterwork that was painted over with this like curved design and sort of like pricked with paint. And it was done by Morris and all of his friends. I thought that was really pretty. And then here's another picture of the interior. This is this spacious drawing room. I love this room. I think it's so beautiful. The ceilings, all the details, just the light that you get in here, the color palette, really, really pretty. And same with that bay window, which is off to the right, you'll see in that bigger photo. And the murals actually that you see. So this space is kind of dominated by this large bench, which was also designed by Morris in the center. And then the murals you see on either end are actually done by Burne-Jones. And it depicts a wedding scene, which I thought it was kind of funny where the bride and groom in this mural are recognizably painted as William and Jane. So I thought that was interesting. Unfortunately, with like long hours, I know it seemed like he was commuting back and forth a lot to London for work, and then some financial troubles meant that he sold the house in 1865. So they only lived there for about 5 years, and it remained a private residence until about 2003. Then it was acquired by the National Trust of Great Britain, and now the Red House functions as a museum. I have not been there. I don't know if anyone has, but I would love to go. And another interesting thing, originally the Red House had no wallpaper because Morris had not yet really entered into that field of work just yet. So I was reading about the house and the state it's in now. The architecture hasn't really been altered at all, but most of the original furniture is gone. And then some of the original wall paintings are now covered with modern reproductions of his wallpaper. Cool. So we can I have a few slides that show his famous work. So after he moved back to London, the firm with all of his friends dissolved in 1875 under the sole direction of Morris. He rebranded it to just Morris and Company, where he then spent the next decade really developing, designing, and mastering techniques with textiles, wallpapers, embroideries, tapestries. And you'll see a lot of these are still widely used today. And during his career, he produced about 50 wallpapers, and they all have this very naturalistic take on nature. And I think it's quite radical for the time also, like very different than what was in style then, which were more of these elaborate sort of French style wallpapers. And although these are still rather ornamental, they were still considered less gaudy than the others that they were seeing at the time. And they were more of this like flat, less 3D, and had this key theme of flora and fauna. Again, going back to his inspiration with nature, a lot of these lines reminiscent of these like rural bucolic life. I'm sure a lot inspired by Red House in the countryside. I read that Morris wanted his designs to feel like a breath of fresh air in the woods or the forest rather than something artificially created in some sort of like royal garden. And a lot of it, you'll see that flowers and leaves and plants are really sort of the protagonists in the motifs. And then these birds and fruits are a lot of the time accessorizing elements that are intertwined kind of amongst all of them. And the color palettes tend to stick to more natural hues with the occasional pop. You'll see like the red with the strawberries. So this on the far left, Trellis, is the first wallpaper he designed in 1862. And it was inspired by a rose trellis in the garden of the Red House. So I thought that was fun. And then all of these prints, actually, these images I pulled, they're actually all the originals. And he used these hand-cut wood blocks to create these and loaded them with natural dyes and did all of them like one at a time, which I'm sure was a very long process. And it really wasn't until about 1870 that Morris mastered wallpapering and this technique, and that he started to become more established in that world. So his wallpaper started becoming more recommended in design books, and eventually started making his way into more artistic middle-class homes. And eventually his papers became too expensive for most people to afford. In 1884, Morrisonian had become a known term, and wallpaper design was no longer really an anonymous art. And in 1887, Queen Victoria commissioned Morris & Co. to create a special wallpaper for Balmoral Castle, which you'll see on the left there. And after Morris died, the next generation of designers, there was a conscious effort in really kind of keeping on his legacy and working with a lot of influence that he instilled. And so you'll see here on the right, Charles Worsley's another English architect and furniture textile designer, that shows a lot of Morris's influence in this like flat but complex pattern with a lot of organic forms and nature motifs. This is a 3-minute video. I don't know if we have time for this.
Go ahead, it's fine.
Okay. It kind of gives you all the work that goes into doing it that way.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, so this is just showing a few of his works in other mediums, embroidery and textiles. And then I wanted to kind of loop it into more modern day and the influence of his work that we see today. So I pulled a couple of images. So the left one here is a boutique hotel outside of Charleston called the Post House. And it occupies a 19th century building. I don't know if anyone's familiar with this, but I thought that they use a lot of Morris wallpaper, and the building itself is just like stunning. I was looking up, I just fell down this deep rabbit hole of like all of these boutique hotels. But yeah, so I pulled that one. And then the one on the right is, if you're familiar, her name's Heidi Kaye, and she's based in Washington, and she does a lot of really beautiful arts and crafts movement inspired work. And this is using William Morris fruit wallpaper in this dining room here. And I thought it's interesting. There was a quote that I read. Let me look at it so I don't butcher it. But Morris said, "Simplicity of life, even the barest, is not a misery, but the very foundation of refinement." And I really liked that. His company is still up and running. I mean, Morris & Co., it's been like 150 years, which I think really is telling to the really elegant simplicity of his work. And these designs of his, I feel, just make a space feel so nostalgic. It's like something you'd seen in your grandmother's house, but still yet incredibly like clean and refined. And I think it's a really beautiful hybrid of this like old meets new and simple yet complex. And a couple others, just a few additional spaces. These are two British designers that I like, Ben Pentreath and then Rose Uniacke. I don't know if anyone's familiar with one or both, but I love Rose Uniacke in particular. Her work is beautiful and definitely one to check out. But these ones are both using William Morris wallpapers. And I wanted to pull in a more modern influence, Glossier beauty brand, if you're familiar. So they did a pop-up shop in London in 2019. And I was reading this article about how there was all these parallels during their research and sort of like visual identity design exploration around using a bunch of his prints and all the florals and the palettes. And so I thought this was really cool, very playful. And then just a couple of more, this is my last slide, but additional works by Ben Pentreath. as I was doing more and more research about all this, it feels almost like there's this revival to the arts and crafts movement happening now. And maybe it's this like reaction to so much digitization and the pace in which we live with technology. And I personally felt that, you know, living in San Francisco, in New York City for 10 years, and then kind of coming to Santa Barbara, trying to get away and simplify life. And I find that the ethos of this movement is very relevant in today's world. This whole notion of like less is more, and themes around like craft and simplicity and community. And I think also with COVID and this pandemic in particular, there's been a lot of joy and appreciation found in more simple, beautiful objects that people are rediscovering. And also this big appetite to really know and understand where our things are coming from and how they're made. And not just within design, I think it's across other industries like food and fashion. I think there's more of this pride and transparency that's happening. So I find that, you know, this movement and really the like distinct designs of all the fabrics and the wallpapers that William Morris has done, I feel like it continues to really inspire and shape a lot of our interior world today. And that's all.
I really love that Sussex bench that's on the last slide.
Isn't it beautiful?
Yeah, the way it's like a sheaf of like wheat or something like that, like gathered in the center. It's really cool.
Yeah, this was actually just published in House and Garden in February or March, February, I forget, but I saw this and I thought, oh my gosh. And then of course it's all William Morris. So it's like perfect.
Yeah, it's really pretty.
Yeah.
Yeah, his stuff is really cool, and it's really interesting how like what has survived. I
Mhm.
mean, it's not like the wallpapers are like so easy to make, but they're a little easier to make than
Yeah.
like the furniture and the stuff that he was doing.
Right.
So at least, but then again, probably not all of his wallpaper and fabrics are made, obviously not all made by hand. So some is able to be mass produced.
Yes.
Still expensive though, but at least
Yeah. And there was this whole thing too. It wasn't that he was like totally anti-machine. I think that it's more just really kind of reeling back and understanding who the person is and like being able to really master the technique, a person mastering the technique versus just, you know, deferring to all machinery.
right.
But yeah.
No, that's cool. That's great. Beautiful.
Yep. Thank you.
Who would like to go?
Madison, do you want to go or do you want me to go? We're the last two left.
You can go first.
Okay, I'll go. Let me. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why it's not going full screen. Is it full screen on your end?
No. If you hit present, can you go to full screen?
Oh yeah, that's what I gotta hit.
Sandy, I'm looking at pictures of the Post House Inn. It's really
Isn't it beautiful?
Yeah.
There we go. Okay, so obviously my presentation's on George Hepplewhite, and I'm going to apologize ahead of time. I created my slides in a different platform and brought them into Google Slides, and so they look a little distorted, a little stretched. So the furniture looks wide and squatty, unfortunately.
Oh yeah, I see what you mean, but
So anyway, okay. So I thought it was best to start talking a little bit about the neoclassical era, just to give a little bit of a background to understand, since George Hepplewhite is from that era. And even though we study that, just as a reminder, neoclassicism began in Rome in the 18th century. And then it spread all over Europe due to the Grand Tour. And what the Grand Tour was it was European students that were, I think, basically affluent. So these were men around 21 years old, and they would travel around in Europe with a chaperone, usually one of their parents. And they would invite some artists to go with them. And so this caused the neoclassical style to spread throughout Europe from Rome. And basically what it was it's a revival of the past, because if you remember that we went from Baroque to Rococo, where it was very, I'm going to use the word gaudy, because in my opinion it was, extreme, overly done. And what happened is they started excavating and discovering basically ruins and antiquities in Greece and Rome. And so they kind of went back to looking at Greek and Roman art in that era. And this is what influenced the neoclassical movement and style. And a lot of that was the form, if you think about the columns that we learned about, Rococo being asymmetrical. So now everything is going back to being very symmetrical and based on the form of the Greek and Roman style. So the neoclassical movement really set in 1760, which was the mid 18th century. So there were two early neoclassical designers from England that were most associated with this style, James Stewart and Sir William Chambers. The table on the left is from James Stewart, and again, it's in 1760, which I just said was really the start of this movement. And this was a wash table, and you can see that this is quite a far cry from that Rococo style. It's very plain, it's very simple. And I'm going to be talking about the leg styles, but if you can see that the top looks to be inlaid, and the leg styles are straight, they're not curved. The feet is called a spade foot, which was actually Hepplewhite used that foot style a lot. And then on the right is Sir William Chambers in 1769, and this was a little table for serving coffee. And again, it's straight, symmetrical, and it's got inlaid ebony and hardstones on the top of it. So again, the style of the neoclassical era focused on form because of the influence of the Roman and Greek architecture and art and the artifacts that they found. So Robert Adam had the greatest impact on the early development of the neoclassical style, and he was actually Scottish, but he studied architecture in Rome. And so he was an architect, an interior designer, and a furniture designer. And after leaving Rome, where again, he was influenced by all of the Roman artifacts, he established a practice in London. So he really influenced the development of Western architecture. And it's interesting to me, this chair to the right, which again is in 1764, it's very ornate looking, more similar to the Rococo style, other than the fact that it is symmetrical style. But it's interesting that it was made at Chippendale's workshop, and I'm going to talk about Chippendale here in a minute, but Chippendale's furniture tended to be more ornate than Hepplewhite furniture. And you can see some of the, again, these are the curved cabriole style legs and the claw and ball foot. And you can see a motif up on the back, which is the shell style motif. And then I don't know if you can see it, but the arms have the carving on them that are fluted like a Roman column. So the neoclassical style in England became famous by what is known as the Big Three. So again, here is Chippendale, and there's George Hepplewhite and Thomas Sheridan. And I'm just going to say that when I was creating these slides, it was so funny because it's Thomas Chippendale and Thomas Sheridan. I kept typing Thomas Hepplewhite. I wanted to call him Thomas too, even though his first name's George. But Thomas Chippendale and George Hepplewhite, even though Chippendale came first, they were pretty much contemporaries. And Hepplewhite passed away about 7 years after Chippendale. But again, their styles were somewhat different in that Chippendale was influenced a little bit more from that Rococo and Baroque style than Hepplewhite was. So getting into, and I apologize, I have a barky dog. I was hoping she'd be quiet in the other room. So who is George Hepplewhite, the man? Well, so he was born supposedly in 1727, but I have a question mark there because little is known about him, and they question whether that was actually when he was born in England. And he was a cabinet maker and a furniture designer, and it wasn't until after his death that his designs really received recognition. They say he apprenticed at Gillows in Lancaster, which is in England. And Gillows was a famous furniture manufacturer that was famous for manufacturing high quality furniture. But the Oxford Dictionary of Bibliography is skeptical about whether he actually did apprentice there. He opened a shop in London, and he married a woman named Alice Hepplewhite. And earlier, I mentioned Robert Adam as being the real start of the neoclassical era, and he was heavily influenced by Robert Adam. Is that my next one? Yes. Okay. So now getting into the Hepplewhite furniture, his furniture dates. There's conflicting dates because so much of the information on him is minimal. So it says it dates from 1780 to 1810. And again, he passed away in 1786. So this is at the end of his life, really, when his furniture starts to become kind of known. And the thing that I found so interesting in my research, and maybe I missed this somewhere along in this semester, but these people, these designers like George Hepplewhite, I just assumed that a piece of Hepplewhite furniture was manufactured by a company, his company. And that wasn't the case. He was a designer. He was not a manufacturer. So there are no known pieces of furniture made by Hepplewhite or his firm. So he gave his name to a distinctive style, and his style was very light and elegant and glamorous and fashionable. So, and his style and his designs have been reproduced for centuries. This particular dresser is a Hepplewhite style dresser. It's got a bow front, which means it's curved on the front, and it is inlaid. Again, this piece of furniture, you'll see it says Virginia in 1790, and that's because while the neoclassical movement was happening in Europe, the federal movement was happening in the United States. And so this particular piece of furniture was manufactured by a company in Virginia with his style. And I'm going to talk about it more, but I just want to make mention of those pools, the drawer pools that are on there, because those are a Hepplewhite style pool that we're going to see again. So I know there's a lot of information on this slide, but some of the characteristics of Hepplewhite furniture was straight legs. So again, this was in comparison to like a Chippendale or the earlier cabriole legs with the curves. So his legs, the legs were straight or in square, or they might have tapered down at the bottom. And they were often reeded or fluted, like I mentioned earlier, influenced because of the Greek and Roman columns. Some of the chairs had, and sofas had H stretchers, and these chairs that you see to the left, which are very classic Hepplewhite style chair with the shield back. These have the H stretcher on the bottom. These feet are simple, and like I mentioned earlier, the spade foot, which we'll see again, but we saw earlier, but these feet just tend to kind of taper and narrow down a little bit. Some of his furniture that was older, earlier styles were a little bit more ornate, but typically his furniture tends to be very simple and graceful and elegant in appearance. And most of the, like that ornate carving was not present on his furniture. There was small carvings, but most of the design was painted or done with inlaid patterns of contrasting wood colors, which we know as marquetry. And some of the common motifs were graceful swags, curling ribbons, feathers, urns, trees, seashells, and flowers. And so this particular image that I included here is from First Dibs, and this is a dining chair, again, from 1820. So this is quite a while after his death of 1786. And you can purchase this set of chairs. I think they are available for $18,500, which is amazing to me that, again, these are designed by him. These are his design, but these are not manufactured by any company called Hepplewhite. So Hepplewhite actually kind of popularized the sideboard. And here is a sideboard that's considered a Hepplewhite sideboard. This is for sale on Cherish for $13,000. And this sideboard, you can see, has all of the inlaid contrasting wood designs, and it has the Hepplewhite pools. You can see above the legs, there are, it's inlaid wood, but it gives that image of the columns, like a fluted look of a column. And then the motifs, you see the curling ribbons and flowers, and there's some acanthus. And again, these are gilded bronze pools. So I thought it would be good to compare the big three, again, Chippendale, Hepplewhite, and Sheraton. So here are chairs from all three. The first one is a Chippendale chair. And again, it's got the cabriole leg with the claw and ball foot. And the kind of, this is not overly intricate in terms of a gaudy design, but on the splat back there, it's carved. The Sheraton chair in the middle is very square, and his furniture tended to be much more linear than Hepplewhite style. And Hepplewhite style was actually known as being easily identifiable. Again, the shield back chair of Hepplewhite on the right. And if you look and see, these are all from England in the 18th century, but these are all for purchase on First Dibs at a pretty penny, for sure, right? Oh, there's that foot on the Hepplewhite style. That's the spade foot that you can see there on the bottom, rather than it just going straight down or tapering at the bottom. So his legacy is that he died in 1786, but his business was continued by his widow, Alice Hepplewhite. And in 2 years after his death in 1788, she published this book, which I laugh every time I see the title. This is the whole title, The Cabinet Maker's and Upholsterer's Guide, or Repository of Designs for Every Article of Household Furniture in the Newest and Most Approved Taste, displaying a great variety of patterns. And you can actually still purchase this book. It's there's different sites have it for about $6,000. And it was actually, like I said, the first edition was printed in 1788, and it has 3 editions. The last edition was 1794, I believe, when it was printed. So, like I said, Hepplewhite was a designer, not a manufacturer. And so in the 1880s, a lot of British furniture manufacturers did revive his designs. And in the United States, the Kittinger Furniture Company of Buffalo, New York, they became known for Hepplewhite reproductions in the 1920s and 1930s. And some of those actually have become collectibles. The nice thing about Hepplewhite design, and one thing I love about his design and English design in general, is that it is so simple and clean lines. And because of that, it's still, it doesn't go out of style, and it still can be used today. And it actually works in a lot of different design styles to incorporate some of these older pieces of furniture in. And like I mentioned, you can purchase so much of this furniture online still, whether it's at First Dibs or Cherish. You can actually purchase pieces that are of the style on other websites as well. But if you don't want to pay those high prices, I thought I would share with you. This is a recent purchase of mine that I just made within the last month. And this actually is, again, it's not so squatty looking. It's more like a tall high boy. And this was made by the Dixie Furniture Company, which is a furniture company that was established in 1946, I believe, in South Carolina. They made a lot of American furniture, and this really has a lot of the feature of Hepplewhite. It has the bow front. This piece is made out of mahogany. It's got the, I don't know if you can see it, but on the stiles, they're actually fluted like a column. And I only paid $189 for this.
Where did you get it?
You know what, you can get this style. I love this style, and it's really common. It's pretty common. I actually purchased it from a woman off of Marketplace on Facebook. And I knew I wanted, this is exactly what I wanted. But like in LA, people sell them all the time. And this one is a Dixie. Sometimes they're not Dixie or one of the, I think Stanley is another American furniture maker. And I actually bought this to paint it, but it's in such good shape. I don't know, I'm gonna feel bad putting paint on it, so I haven't decided. But again, those Hepplewhite drawer pulls, you can buy those, I think, even on Amazon now, and they're obviously not gilded bronze like they were back in the day. But anyway, my house is not decorated as, full of antiques, but again, I like to bring in some older pieces and mix it in with new.
Yeah, those are cool. I mean, even, and the hardware looks really good, because I mean, if you wanted to, or if you needed to, you could always refit, have the hardware dipped or whatever, but they look.
Yeah. Well, that's what I thought I would do. I was actually going to have it dipped and make them a little bit more gold in color. But for now, it's just going to sit, it's in my spare bedroom. It's going to sit there for now.
The
Like
drawers, so the drawers in the bottom half, those what look to be skinny drawers on the top of the bottom half, are those really skinny drawers, or is it just?
No, it's one.
It's interesting.
Yeah, that's one drawer. Yeah.
Just to break up the design a little bit. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
that's cute. Cool.
That's it.
I know, isn't it so interesting, like that all of those guys created those the designs and just like sold I mean, it's kind of like they were licensing, but not really.
Well, what's interesting, I just want to add, what, I totally forgot to say this. The book that his widow produced, a lot of the plaques in the book of the drawings,
Mhm.
they say A. Hepplewhite, standing for Alice Hepplewhite. And so there's a theory that some people believe that maybe that she used George Hepplewhite as a pen name to get her designs published.
Really?
And if you think about it, back then, a woman wouldn't be able to, do you know what I mean? And so they wonder if a lot of the designs were actually hers and not his.
That's interesting.
But, yeah, but they don't know.
Right.
I have a question. So all of them, Hepplewhite, Sheraton, and the other one, they created the prototypes and then they sold the manual of how to make them. And is that how I'm just curious how they made
Well,
them.
that's an interesting question. I don't know, Michelle, whether you know. And I really only researched Hepplewhite, other than, small little bits of information about the other two. But like I said, there's so little information on Hepplewhite, which is interesting because his furniture is so well known and he's considered one of, like I said, the big three in that English neoclassical movement. So the designs, the drawings in that book are very architectural looking, they,
Mhm.
design wise, but I don't know what the process is or what the process was back then for manufacturing a piece of furniture from a design. But yeah, so he lended his designs to manufacturers, but he didn't do the manufacturing.
Yeah, I mean that's what I understand. It's like they just were trying to disseminate their ideas and sell the design, but not actually manufacture the furniture.
Well, yeah, and the thing is, when I said that he set up shop in London, like I couldn't find any information. So I said, okay, so he set up shop. So what was that shop? Because he was a cabinet maker. So was he making cabinets? Is that what his shop was? But I never could find really any information about that.
That's interesting. Cool.
Yeah.
I'm trying to see if Crystal will come back in. Sorry, I was texting her. All right. Well, thanks, Julie. That's really cool. Really interesting. Madison, do you want to go?
Yeah, I can go. Share. All right, can you guys see this?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I did my presentation on Florence Knoll. And just a little bit of background. She was born in Michigan, but her parents passed away by the time she was 14. So she was given the option to go to boarding schools. And so they gave her a couple to choose from, and she chose to go to Kingswood School, which was also associated with Cranbrook Academy of Art. And Alil Saarinen was the headmaster of the school, and he was a Finnish architect. So that's kind of how she got her start in architecture. And she earned her bachelor's degree in architecture from the Armour Institute of Chicago. And while she was there, she studied under Ludwig Mies van, or I forgot what his name was.
Van der Rohe. Mies van der Rohe.
Van der Rohe, yes. And then eventually she moved to New York to start working. And while she was there, she met Hans Knoll, who was a German furniture maker, and he had started his own furniture company. And then he eventually hired her on to help him with interior design projects. And so eventually they were married, and then they renamed the company Knoll Associates, and she became an equal partner with him. And then once she was a partner, then she launched the Knoll Planning Unit, which was an interior design division of the company. And then eventually, a year later, she launched Knoll Textiles, and they collaborated with designers and manufactured the designers' designs. So for collaboration, originally when it was just a furniture company, then Knoll Hans had his own designs, but then when Florence came on, she had all of these great connections that she had met while she was at school. So her teachers and her classmates. And so she brought them on to collaborate with them. And what they did was offered them credit for their designs and paid them royalty and commissions. And then Knoll Associates would manufacture the designs. And then most of those designs were like chairs and things. So in order to fill that gap, Florence designed her own furniture because she couldn't find furniture that she wanted for corporate offices, which was what Knoll Planning Unit mostly focused on, was designing corporate offices. And she considered her furniture to be the meat and potatoes, or the filler pieces, and she was like very modest about her designs. And she considered the designer chairs to be the stars, but she ended up designing half of the collection because they needed like sofas and credenzas and case goods, and so she designed a ton of pieces to fill in. And so one of their collaborators was Eero Saarinen, who she went to school with, and who was Alil's son. And he created the Womb chair, the Model 71 chair, and the Grasshopper. And these are just a few of the designs that Knoll Associates produces and that they're well known for. And kind of an interesting backstory on the Womb chair. That was inspired by Florence, kind of, because she told Eero to design a chair that felt like a bed of pillows that she could just curl up in and be comfortable in. And when he designed this piece, they ended up going to a boat manufacturer and asking this boat guy to help them design a fiberglass mold for the chair. That was kind of interesting, I thought. And you'll see the Womb chair and the Model 71 chair are very, very common in the corporate offices that they design. And then Marcel Brewer, she met him while working at a company that he worked at. And so these are two of the chairs that they manufacture at Knoll. And then Harry Bertoa, she went to school with him at Cranbrook, and they also manufactured this chair for him. And then Mies van der Rohe, which was one of her mentors at the Chicago school. So these are two of the chairs, and the Barcelona chair is also very commonly used for their corporate offices. And then so Florence Knowles considered these pieces the meat and potatoes, or her filler pieces. And kind of interesting about her sofa, which are these three couches on the top. She designed these specifically to accompany the Womb chair. And she liked to design her pieces kind of more linear and minimalist, and she left the sculpting to the other designers, as she would say. And then these bottom two chairs are part of her parallel bar collection, and you'll see all these a lot in her office spaces as well. And this is her bench that she designed. And then this is her stacking stool with the hairpin legs. And this was one of her earliest designs. And then this bottom right-hand desk is one of the earliest office desks that she designed. And it's the first time you see like really streamlined, not a lot of storage, but just very minimalist. And then these two desks here, they're oval and rectangular, are her executive desks. And she designed those because she figured that an executive isn't filing things, that's for the secretary to do. So they really don't need storage. And since their main role in a company is usually communication, she wanted it to be kind of like a conference table so that the executive could meet with clients or whatever and have meetings. And then she would put something like this, like a credenza along the back wall, so that that's where they would put this, would be able to store anything that they needed. And I wanted to specifically include this credenza because it's one of her earlier designs, and it is currently for sale for $13,800, which is crazy, but it's such a cool piece. And I also think that this look is really coming back into style. Like I've seen very similar pieces to this.
Is that caning, or is it like canvas or burlap, or what is that
It
material?
said it was like a seagrass material.
Well, do you remember that sketch that I showed you guys and how she kind of like slapped on like textures to things? And I kind of remember like a credenza with like, you know, tannish brown texture kind of like collaged on. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's really fun. I like how she included the texture to kind of bring interest to it too.
Mhm.
Really cool. So here is, I just wanted to include this picture because I think it's a great example showing how all of those designer chairs and then her little filler pieces all tie together really well. So you see the Barcelona chair and the womb chair, which is next to the sofa that she designed to accompany the womb chair. Oh no, my computer. And then her end table, which is super common with the marble and the chrome legs. And then you'll see the Model 72 chair in the back, which was another Saarinen design. And then her parallel bar chair. And she was one of the things I learned about her, which I thought was really cool, is she's responsible for setting so many of our industry standards, and we just take them for granted now. And I never even would have thought that one person could have designed or come up with all these standards that we have. So this one, I love her paste ups because she uses cardboard and models it with 4 walls so that she can design exactly what it's going to look like. And it was her way of kind of convincing clients to go with her modern office feel, because it really gave them a good idea of what it would look like, what it would feel like, and she could show textures, and it was just, I think that's such a genius idea. And then her little sketches. So yeah, she came up with this concept in the 1930s while she was still a student, and it's just became an industry standard after that. And I love this one because it shows how it actually came to be. And I love the textures that she includes and all the little fabric samples. And then it just, like, she actually designs it almost exactly like that. And then another industry standard are fabric swatches, which she came up with in the 1950s, which was a 3x3 inch swatch with the cardboard showing the name and then with information on the back, and then connected with a key ring, which who knew? And that's such a standard today that everyone uses for picking out pieces and whatnot. And then showrooms are also her design. So before her, I guess most showrooms were like warehouses, and so it just wasn't interesting, but she wanted to be able to show the clients what it would actually feel like to live in a place with her furniture. And so she is the one that came up with the vignettes. And so when you walk into her showroom, it's like a bunch of little rooms, like an office or a living room. And so, and you couldn't even tell like what pieces of furniture were for sale or what part were just part of the design. And she'd often include artwork. And yeah, so it was just like a complete picture of what it could look like. And that was a major selling point for their company that really helped sales skyrocket. And now that's what we use. And then she's best known as the designer of the modern American office. So I chose to include 3 of her biggest projects, I guess. So Connecticut General Life Insurance Company was her first really big project, and this proved her skill and what the planning unit could do. And so once she had successfully designed this, then a lot of other companies started hiring them to design their office spaces. And she's the one that also came up with the open floor plan idea. And so there's a lot less private offices, and the private offices that they still had like thinner partitions and maybe like frosted glass. So it was just more open. And then in the next picture, you can see this. They include the Model 71 or 72 chair, and these are her tables, and then the parallel bar couches. So yeah. And then the Cowles Publications office was in 1962, and it's the most celebrated project that the planning unit did. And it was this huge space of 13,000 square foot that was just for 27 employees. So that gave them a ton of room to really spread things out. And she made 100.
Oh no. Her computer died. I knew it was about to. Oh no. I love Florence Knowles collages. Oh wait, is Krista coming in?
What a cliffhanger.
Totally, right? She's like at the modern, the best design they ever did, and gone. Yeah. Maybe she'll come back on. Poor Madison. Oh my gosh. That's so funny. And then I missed Krista and I missed Crystal.
I had no idea that Florence Knoll invented the swatches on a ring.
I actually didn't know that either. It's not surprising
That's
though.
pretty
She's so clever.
And I love her layout with the 4 walls on a board. That's really a great idea.
Well, I mean, and it keeps you from like making any ugly elevations, right? Like forgetting about, oh, what are you gonna do over here? Oh, we'll stick a plant over here. No, you need to do something. You need to put something over there. Yeah, that's cool. Really cool. I mean, the fact that she even graduated with a degree in architecture seems like almost an insurmountable like thing to have accomplished, let alone becoming an equal partner, you know, in a company, having basically, you know, make a name for herself and herself alone, and then just, you know, design all these things. It's very cool. I really like her work, and I still love like all the Knoll products. Like if I'm ever like doing like an office, like I did this gorgeous marble, huge 14-foot conference table that's like Arabescato marble honed, like so gorgeous. And I mean, the client that bought it was just like, it's how much? Because I pretty sure it was like $30,000, and then the chairs were another like 25. It was crazy. It was crazy. But I'm like, you'll never replace this chair and table, these chairs and table ever. Madison. Oh my gosh, you're muted.
Of course, my computer died right in the middle.
Sandy was like, oh, that was a cliffhanger.
All right, let's see here. Sorry about that, you guys.
No, we were just talking about her.
Okay. Anyway, and I love this, like this bigger paste up model that she did for this project. It's really cute and easy. I just think it's such a great way to show vision and show the texture and colors, and just really cool. And so here's 2 pictures from inside, and you can see the Model 71 chair here, and the Barcelona chairs, and her parallel bar sofa over here. I also love this wall that divides, like it's still see-through, but it has this texture. And I feel like that's a really common feature in the mid-century modern design.
I know, it's so Palm Springs.
Yeah, it is. I love it. Yeah, and this is just so minimalistic, but still really beautiful, like with the design of the wall and just the plants. She is really good at bringing in textures to make things more interesting.
That light like runs along the top of the wall is nice too.
Oh, yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
And then her final project right before she retired in 1965. So this was the last project that she did with the planning unit. And it was for CBS. And Aaron actually designed the building and was the architect on the building. And then he passed away. And so then she was hired to complete the interiors. But you can see her sofas and her table. And then I'm not sure actually who did. I think these were Max Pearson chairs, maybe. And then her executive desk in the middle. And I just love the colors and the pattern on the carpet and the textures on the walls with the curtains. But yeah, and that's it.
I love how the chrome reflects the like you get that reflection of the carpet in the chrome, and so it almost looks like it's on the it's like on the edge of the.
Yeah, it is really cool.
It's very cool.
Yeah, I just think it's so cool how she is like responsible for setting so many standards, and she just like, if something didn't exist that she wanted, she's like, okay, I'm gonna create it myself. And I think that's what really made Knoll Associates such a successful company, and she was able to take it so far. And she's the reason why interior design today is all encompassing, and we're not just interior decorators like how it was when she was studying. But she really like transformed this field into something that does take into account architecture and furniture and design, and just really focuses on everything, not just one thing. And so that's really cool that she was the one that like is the reason for that.
Yeah. That's cool. Well, thanks. Thanks for hanging in there. Well, awesome, you guys. Is there anybody else that's trying to get in? No. Well, this was great. This was really fun to see your presentations, and super inspiring. I don't know, to learn about all these different things that you don't always get a chance to like dig into. And I hope that you continue like learning, digging in to like specific areas that you found interesting, and learning even more about furniture and interiors and architecture and stuff like that, because there just is like so much to learn, right? It's like can never stop. Are you guys, most of you, let's see, 1, 2, 3 of you. So there's a 2, but I think you guys, Julie, I think you're taking materials, right?
Yes, I am.
And Sandy, are you taking materials?
I want to. I just haven't had a chance to look at my fall schedule yet.
And so I was talking to Armando, and he said they're working on getting the schedule updated, the in-person schedule updated, and that's why it still is saying.
Oh, it's updated now.
Is it updated now? Okay, good.
Yeah, but materials, I think you said it was on Thursday. It's on Wednesdays.
Really?
That's what the schedule says.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting. Okay.
Wednesday evenings, is that right?
Try to make myself available for that.
Like,
Yeah,
are you free?
that if you're not available.
Like 5 years. For 5 years, it's been Thursday. Nobody told me that they were moving it to Wednesday. That's hilarious. I'll have to look that up or talk to Armando about that. I mean, it's fine. It's just funny.
And it's interesting because, you know, I'm wondering if SBCC is doing a hybrid system, because some of the classes, like there's an art class that's listed still as online. So I don't know whether they just haven't uploaded the time or if they're doing some classes online still.
Yeah, I have no idea. I thought they were doing everything in person, but yeah,
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't know. I'm looking forward to it. It'll be good. Really good. Well, I've really enjoyed, I mean, this has been, you know, very bizarre doing the Zoom stuff, but I've really enjoyed the, you know, the classes and the getting to know you, and your work is, you know, all the drawings that you're sharing are so good. It's so fun to see everybody's work and how different everybody's work is. It's really cool. So thanks for that. So yeah, so if you have any questions about assignments or anything like that, it's like, I think I did a big announcement where I said what day everything is due, but basically, I think I said the last day of instruction, what is on the May 7th. So, you know, get everything in by that day or that weekend. Because I think, I haven't heard, but I think they're going to tell me that I need to get my grades in by the 12th, May 12th. But I'll send another reminder out there because I know people are trying to finish up. But yeah, so let me know if you have any questions or anything like that. Okay.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
good luck on the rest of your finals and all that stuff. And I'll see some of you next semester.
Thank you.
I'm jealous that they're getting the in-person class for materials because you get to go on all those field trips.
Yeah, I think I know. It is a kind of a bummer, right? I
But
mean,
it was interesting even on Zoom. It was really interesting to see it, but I've been in person to see the marble and the tile and all that.
Yeah.
In person would be nice.
well, maybe you should audit, Gabby. Just come in.
I know I should.
I'll just tell you. But it'll be Wednesday.
Wednesday.
All right, you guys.
Thank you.
See
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, Michelle.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.